drama scenes with drama queens and heroes acting out there on the silver screen. Come grab a seat, the popcorn is on me.
Hello, welcome to Meet Me at the Movies. I am Noel T. Manning II with Thomas Manning. So good to have you all join us. However you choose to do that, whether that's through C19 TV or through WGWG. And we do want to give a shout out to Mr. Greg Tillman, who is on medical leave. We're not sure how long. The bionics they put into his body, it takes a little time to adjust, as anybody who's ever had that done understands that it takes a little time. And if you're part of the undead family, and you're trying to get rejuvenated, that can take some time as well. And we're going to be talking about the undead in a certain way today. Thomas, you got a chance to check out an early screening of a Nick Cage movie, Renfield. But before we go into that, you doing okay this week?
Oh yeah, I'm doing great. Hear a little bit of background noise. Sounds like a little bit of whining, and I don't know if there's just if you got a mini train set in the background or something, or
no,
there's a whistle.
If there's any screaming or whining, it sounds like wailing animals. That's all sound effects that we're adding for this particular segment of Meet Me at the Movies, episode 502, by the way. And for those of you that say, wait a minute, what happened to the big party for episode 500? That's coming. We're just doing it out of sequence. Would you expect any different right here on Meet Me at the Movies? So the movie is Renfield, Thomas. We've been looking forward to this for quite a while. Nick Cage as Count Dracula, and you got Nick Cage behind me for those who are watching this on a visual form. Nick Cage behind me, and then I've got a Dracula thing behind me as well. So I've grown up, Thomas, loving the monster films, especially the Universal monster films, and that kind of bled into my love of anything else relating to monsters, especially vampires, werewolves, and the like. And so I'm excited to get your thoughts on Renfield. And when you look at the trailer for this, it looks like Cage is going full campy. So is it a full camp Cage, or is there more to it?
Yeah, so based on the trailers I'd seen, I figured it was going to be predominantly a comedy film with your classic monster horror elements. But I was also surprised to find that this is more of an action comedy than anything, and action comedy is basically my favorite movie genre. This movie was basically tailor-made for me. When I came out of the screening, I pulled up Letterboxd and checked out a few other reactions, and was surprised to see some other people were not nearly as pleased with it as I was. I even saw some people say, "Who in the world was this made for? The tone is all over the place. What is going on here?" And I'm like, it was me. That's me is the answer to that question. It was made exactly for me. I already knew that I was on board with Nicolas Cage as Count Dracula, the role he was born to play, and he definitely lives up to it.
So, you said action comedy. It sounds like there's a whole lot more action. Now, if you're going to compare this to other films of the like, are there other films that would fit in this category? Zombieland, Shaun of the Dead, any of those maybe have similarities?
Yeah, those two you mentioned in particular are great comparisons. The blood and the gore is insanely over the top and cartoonish. It kind of reminds me of your early Sam Raimi or Peter Jackson B-horror splatterfest movies. The practical effects are just fantastic. There's a scene where Nicholas Hoult, who plays Renfield, the title character, he literally rips off a bad guy's arms and beats somebody else with those arms, and then throws those arms like a javelin at other bad guys. So
it is violent, but it's an over-the-top violent that's done for not necessarily the shock value, but for the humor value.
Yeah, I mean, I would say it's kind of it's a equal mix of shock and humor value, but it's not it's not realistic gore. It's not something like you'd see in a movie that I talked about a few months ago, Project Wolf Hunting, which was an action film out of Korea, I believe, and the action there was just so grotesque. But it still maintains some realism, but this stretches into the fantastical. So it's, I think even for people who aren't a huge fan of blood and gore, I mean, they're going to come into this and they're going to be shocked, but because it doesn't stretch into that something that's not anatomically how things work, so it's not as terribly grotesque.
Okay, and the storyline, give us a quick synopsis of the film. So for those who may not be aware, it's about not Count Chocula, but Count Dracula and his little minion Renfield. But the story is more than that, right?
Well, yeah, Renfield is trying to escape from the clutches of Dracula, who's basically had him as his servant for centuries, and it's a toxic relationship, and he wants to do good in the world, but his power comes from Dracula, and in order to feed Dracula, he basically has to feed Dracula souls of the innocent. And that's the whole story is Renfield's kind of moral dilemma and trying to find a way to live a life of positivity and put good into the world while still maintaining his own life.
Wow, that's really interesting. So it's a morality tale of someone who is giving the souls of others to the Prince of Darkness, basically. Okay, so
yeah.
So did Cage go full on Raging Cajun in this?
Yeah, so Nicholas, the makeup and prosthetics on him are something that really stand out. In a few scenes, I sat there and thought to myself, wow, this is absolutely repulsive. I can't believe what I'm looking at here, and that's just with the incredible makeup talent behind the scenes. They did their jobs, and Nicholas Hoult is a very talented performer, and he gets to show off his leading man chops here. So the movie is called Renfield. It's obviously going to be his story. But there were a few moments or a few periods in the movie where I really wanted to get away from Hoult and get back to the main attraction for me personally, which was Nicolas Cage as Dracula. So is this a problem for the film at large? Maybe somewhat. I don't see a world in which Nicolas Cage Dracula doesn't overshadow Nicholas Hoult as Renfield. And kind of the whole point of the movie is the character of Renfield trying to overcome this toxic relationship. And Cage as Dracula makes that villainous toxicity just so entertaining. I don't think I would have had as much fun with this movie if it wasn't Cage playing Dracula. And so I guess thematically there are some shortcomings in terms of the narrative's attempt to explore those relationship dynamics. The script didn't quite reach its full potential, but if I'm going to be totally honest, I didn't come to this movie expecting a tight script with nuanced storytelling. It delivered what I signed up for.
Yeah, and I think what the director's intent was, and for those who know what they're getting into, but you said there was kind of the surprise of how much action there was in this, which you didn't expect. So that's good that you kind of lay that out there for those that are anticipating maybe a horror comedy. There is that, but it's not strictly that. Other comments you want to make sure you share about Renfield, and I think, let me say this, Hoult is a great actor, and so having him along with Nick Cage, I think, is pretty solid as well. Any final thoughts or comments before you dive in with your grade?
Well, basically, the whole theater was just hooting and hollering and having a grand old time watching a 90-minute popcorn flick and a packed house of very engaged audience members.
Awesome.
This is the second time recently where I have to make note of the power of watching a comedy with the right audience who is locked in with the material, and that was the case again with this movie. And it is unfortunate that you don't always know walking into a theater how the audience is going to be, and some other audience members might walk into this and have an experience that's not nearly as engaging as mine. But
right.
Speaking from my experience, I did I watched it with the right crowd and very much appreciated it, and I'm going to give this movie a solid B.
Awesome, solid B for Renfield, and that is in theaters now. There's a film that I'm going to give you a kind of a snapshot of, Thomas. Blackberry is based on the true story of the rise and fall of the world's first smartphone. And I used to have a Blackberry, and I loved it. And I had a Palm Trio phone as well. I mean, I remember those early smartphones, and I just loved them even before the iPhone. The story is written and directed by Matt Johnson. It stars Jay Baruchel in this. It's a dramedy, so it's got that dramatic aspect of what you would see in a true story, but also that kind of real-life comedy that bleeds into it. It is going to be released limited theaters on May the 12th, and it made its North American premiere South by Southwest not too long ago. And I think if you're going to look for a triple feature to watch, maybe look at Air, Blackberry, and Tetris, and all that to set up that I did find this film really engaging. I found it entertaining, and if you're looking for something that gives you kind of a behind-the-scenes business of the way that things have happened, and sometimes that fight for control within the chaos, or the fight to thrive within the chaos, this movie does that. It's a story of David's versus Goliath. It's a story of misplaced trust, and also brilliance that is abused. Excellent casting in this, solid narrative. There are a lot of these kind of gotcha moments, and there are also these scenes that will speak without dialogue, that you find yourself going, wow, that's pretty fascinating how they're able to kind of tell this story. There's one scene of the creators of the Blackberry watching Steve Jobs kind of steal the limelight with his own version of the coming Blackberry, the iPhone. If you're a tech nerd, if you love history, if you're drawn to aspects of how businesses succeed and how some may fail, make the call to see this one. It'll be worth your time. Solid B+ for me for the film Blackberry, Thomas.
But your Blackberry, I remember very vividly when I was in elementary school, whenever we were out shopping together on a Saturday or something, I'd be like, hey, Dad, can I see your Blackberry? I want to check some college football scores or check some college basketball scores. I got to see what's going on in the top 25. And that's predominantly my memories with the Blackberry smartphone. So, is there any exploration of the power of ESPN.com on Blackberry?
They don't talk about that much in this movie, but it is really fascinating. And I've been a fan of Jay Baruchel for really a while. And I remember one of the first junkets I got a chance to be a part of in the last few years was How to Train a Dragon, and it was great to be able to chat with him and to see him in a role like this, Thomas, which is a different kind of role. And I think it's worth your time. 2 hours, 2 minutes long, so it's a decent length film, but the pacing really works well with this film. B+. It's nice to see these films that give you these snapshots of history, and we've talked about 3 of them so far, at least teased anyway. All right, we're going to take a quick intermission right here on Meet Me at the Movies. I am Noel T. Manning II, along with Thomas Manning, talking films. After the break, we're going to talk about a couple of other things, and hopefully we'll get an interview in. I know Thomas has an interview with a couple folks from the Florida. Is it the Florida Man? Is that right?
Just Florida Man. There's no the. Once again.
So Florida Man. So we're hoping to get that interview in after the break as well. So hang around after this quick intermission.
Won't you come and meet me at the movies? Won't you come and watch a flick?
Hi, I'm Shara Miller, the host of Artworks. Each month we bring to you wonderful, talented artists from here in Cleveland County and the region. We have artists, we have potters, we have painters, we have musicians, we have actors. We just have wonderful artists that come to you and tell you about all that they're doing, their creativity, what inspires them. Join me here on Artworks each month on C19. You can also watch us online at C19.TV.
At CCC, we're all about training students for exciting careers. Our Barber Academy is a great example. Did you know jobs for barbers, stylists, and other related fields are increasing? Competition for the best jobs will be strong. With your CCC training, you'll have a definite edge. Our courses give you the skills and knowledge you need to sit for North Carolina's Apprentice Barber exam. To move up the ladder, you need at least 1 year of on-the-job training before you take the state's registered barber exam. If you pass, it's official. You'll be a registered barber. While private barber schools can cost $10,000 or more, CCC makes it affordable. Plus, you can complete our Barber Academy in only 15 months. Now the question is, are you ready to start your journey today?
Won't you come and meet me at the movies? Won't you come and watch?
Hello, welcome back to Meet Me at the Movies. I am Noel T. Manning II, hanging out with Thomas Manning. We're talking cinema because we can. And remember, cinema is a term that it could be on your phone. It could be on your Kindle, if you got one of those, your iPad. It can be a laptop, home viewing, or, of course, in the theaters.
Or on your PlayStation Portable or your PSP.
That's right. That's right. However you choose. Maybe your Blackberry. Maybe you've got an old school Blackberry that you've upped it a bit. You've found a way to juice it up that you can watch stuff on. However you choose, that's what we're going to talk about. So something I'm going to talk about, Thomas, I'm a Letterman fan. I mean, David Letterman fan, have been for years. Also a U2 fan. And so when I heard that Letterman and members of U2 were coming together for a documentary, a different kind of documentary, I was really, really intrigued by this. Disney Plus released last month a feature-length doc called Bono and the Edge, A Sort of Homecoming. It's a music doc that I found enlightening, invigorating, also entrancing, Thomas. It's one part documentary, one part just dialogue, and another part of a stripped-down concert. It's a beautiful story, and there's three components to this piece. It looks at the art of songwriting. It looks at the relationship between the Edge and Bono, especially 50 years of friendship there. And it's also the story of Ireland, and I did not expect that going in. Morgan Neville, who is an Emmy, Grammy, and Oscar-winning director, films like 20 Feet from Stardom and Won't You Be My Neighbor, one of my favorite docs of all time. He is the person behind putting this together. Some of the things that really stood out to me about this documentary, Thomas, U2, they talk about, one of the scenes they talk about their halftime show. And they did a halftime show which was post 9/11. So it was the first Super Bowl halftime show after 9/11 happened. And so many times when we think about Super Bowl halftime shows now, we think about the spectacle. We think about, just how crazy is this going to be. But this was really less spectacle, and it was more about a tribute to the memory of those who were fallen. And it was just a beautiful and a different type of halftime show. If you've not seen it, I would really recommend that you go back and take a look at the U2 Super Bowl halftime show. It was just incredibly beautiful. Letterman kind of weaves this story together through walking down the streets, talking to regular people about the kind of U2 experience, talking to other musicians who were inspired by U2, and then, of course, one-on-one and one-on-two interviews with the Edge and Bono. And I love what Letterman does with this. I've always enjoyed him as an interviewer. I've always enjoyed his humor. And to see him do things in a serious way and bring up that is really impressive too. He's got a Netflix series that he's been doing since retirement the past few years called, I think it's called The Next Big Guest, or My Next Guest Is. I'll have to get that title right. I should have done better research. But just look at Letterman on Netflix and look at those interviews. But there's one scene in this where Letterman goes to this beach area called the 40 Foot. It's Dublin's 40 Foot, and it's kind of the beach entrance to the city. And he's having this really interesting experience. There are people that'll go plunging into this cold water, and Letterman's like, "Nah, I'm not going to do that. It's a little too cold for me, but thanks." Well, Letterman's experience there at that what's called the 40 Foot was shared with Bono and the Edge. From Neville shared that kind of experience of Letterman had, and so that night, Bono and the Edge actually wrote and created a song based on Letterman's experience called The 40 Foot Man. And so they did that overnight, and that was kind of shared within this documentary. And when that was shared, it showed me, Thomas, just the talent of what you got with these band members who can just create something that quickly, and it was produced, and it was pretty incredible. So at the end of this doc, and this is not giving anything away really, other than telling you how it ends, but Letterman, after the interviews and everything was wrapped, he actually came back and decided to plunge deep into the 40 foot. So Bono sang that song, and it was just, I was really impressed by that. Also impressed by getting this history of Ireland that I really didn't know, and seeing how it influenced music and how it influenced people, and how the religious aspects of what was happening and is still happening played into the role of the music of U2. What U2 did during the pandemic was they revisited many of their songs, Thomas, many of their old songs, and found ways to recreate them. But they also said that they found ways to finish songs that they never felt were finished. Love this documentary, and you get a chance to see them stripped down and playing in front of a small audience as well, with a cello and just acoustic instruments, and other members of musicians and singers and songwriters from Dublin serving as backup. A solid A+ rating for this documentary that you can find. You can now find that on Disney+. Bono and the Edge, A Sort of Homecoming. Well, Thomas, you got a chance to do an interview with a Florida man. He's not really from Florida, but there's a series, A Florida Man. Do you want me to offer any other kind of introduction, or just kind of go to that tape that you've got for us?
Yes, I'm talking to Edgar Ramirez and Abby Lee about Florida Man, which is going to be streaming on Netflix, a 7-episode limited series from creator Donald Todd, and this was just really fun conversation, and I really appreciated the time I got to spend with him. I really appreciate both of you taking the time for this, and really excited to be talking with you about Florida Man. And I want to say I just love the title of the show itself, and how that's a play on all the news headlines we hear and the wild stories that come from the state of Florida. So I want to ask, what kind of background, if any, did each of you have with the state of Florida prior to making the show? And, are there any memorable stories or headlines that you'd heard that really stuck out?
Well, my main experience with Florida was a long time ago, doing a job in Miami, and coming from Australia, where there's a more conservative nature in the way that people express themselves, I feel, in Australia. Whereas when I went to Florida, to Miami, the sheer size of things and the extravagance of things, and there was a slight absurdity to some parts of Miami that I found that I just thought were fantastic. And so for me, I guess my first experience of Florida was just, I was in awe of it, because I'd never really seen anything like it. So that. I would say that's my experience of it.
Yeah. No, the first time that I came to the United States, it was to the state of Florida. I mean, as a Venezuelan, I went to Disney World, went to Orlando, and I wanted to practice my English, and turned out that everyone spoke Spanish in Orlando. So, and actually in the Orlando area is where the show is kind of like recreated, in the coastal part of Central Florida. And I remember I was with my family. There was a moment in our lives that my family was living in Florida. They were living in Miami. I was still in Venezuela, and then I came to visit, and a hurricane was coming. And then my dad didn't pay attention. He's like, no, this is just the media telling that the hurricane is coming, and he didn't want to, evacuate until, basically we needed to evacuate. And then we went to Orlando, and once we got to a hotel in Orlando, there was a tornado warning. So it's like, wow. I remember that feeling of it's like, okay, are we going to escape from the weather eventually? That and I don't know. I also had the opportunity to go to the places where the show is, the places that inspired the show, and it was a very important experience for me, to get all the sensorial experience of those places, the people that I saw, the beaches that I saw, the places. It was really important to me, because in the end the show is fun, and it's colorful and it's sexy and it's cheeky. But there's also real people trying to make the best out of the situations. You know, I mean, you see also that in these characters, the more they run away from the ghosts of their past, the quicker they come back to haunt them. So basically, our characters, Abby's character Deli and my character Mike, the more, I mean, like their way out of trouble is to create more trouble. You know, which in a way is kind of like the spirit of the Florida Man meme. Mm-hmm. Like there's always a very extravagant, crazy way for someone to resolve a situation, and that's what we do in the show. We try to really stay out of trouble by making and creating more trouble, which I think that many people can identify with.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for sharing that. And I also want to ask about working with, of course, Donald Todd as supervisor of the series, and you also each worked with a total of 4 directors across the 8-episode series. So what did each of you notice in terms of transitioning between the different directors over the course of the season and adapting to their filmmaking approaches?
Well, it's a very interesting experience having to work with numerous people with one character, because a new director comes in and they have their own idea of ways that they might want your character to move or behave, and I don't mean physically move, I just mean move through the world, the way that they move through the world and the way that they respond to people. And there can be an instinct to want to push against that because you've made really solid decisions about who you think your character is. But there's something interesting about allowing that to come through and see what perspective it can put on your character that you maybe haven't seen before. And I didn't find that there was any moment where I was like, that's completely wrong. There was sometimes you had to negotiate, but for the most part, I found all the directors fantastic to work with in their own way, and to have Don as kind of, you know, that godlike figure, just watching over everyone and making sure that the pieces are all, they're constantly being put together in the right way and keeping with the show's tone and what the show's trying to say.
I think that each director has their own superpower, you know, and I felt it that way, that they would all bring something very unique that has to do with their personality. And I think that every time we work with a different director, I think that they were like bringing more richness to the characters. So it was pretty seamless in a way. And yeah, as Anabi said, Don was always there to kind of like monitor that the tone was kept on the right track, because one of the things that we find one of the most interesting things about the show is precisely the tone, because it's a very delicate tone. I mean, it is a comedy, but it's not necessarily like a broad ha comedy. It's kind of like it's offbeat and weird and delicious and dangerous and cheeky and sexy, and that was a very delicate line that we all tried. I mean, it was a very tight rope that we all tried to walk on. Everyone, I mean, the actors, the directors, the producers, everybody was collaborating to keep that tone, to be faithful to that tone. So it was, and I hope that you guys will enjoy it, because as much as we did.
Well, Edgar and Abby, I know you both have a very busy day, but I really do appreciate you fitting me into your schedule, and hopefully we get another chance to talk about some of your future projects.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we're going to wrap things up right here. Meet me at the movies. We are going to wrap it up with a movie quote of the week, and since we were talking about monsters earlier in the show with Renfield, I thought we'd pull a quote from Mike Wazowski from Monsters Incorporated from 2001. Remember, laughter is 10 times more powerful than screams, unless, of course, Nick Cage is after you dressed as Count Dracula. So until next time, for Meet Me at the Movies, I am Noel T. Manning II, along with Thomas Manning, and for this week, that's a wrap.